When the war in Ukraine kicked off, it wasn't just about tanks and trenches. It was the first shot in an economic world war. And while we were all watching the sanctions, something much, much bigger was happening in the shadows. A new global order was being built. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on the story that almost everyone missed. Okay, so let's get right to the heart of the mystery. In 2022, the West dropped the hammer. We're talking the most brutal economic sanctions in modern history, all designed to absolutely cripple Russia's economy. Logically, it should have been game over, but it wasn't. The Russian economy didn't collapse, and the question is, why? To get to the bottom of this, we have to start with the West's main weapon, the sanctions themselves. We need to figure out why they didn't deliver that knockout blow everyone was expecting. Honestly, this one chart tells you almost everything you need to know. Just look at this. See that bar on the left? That's the G7 nations. The US, Germany, Japan, you know the drill. Their exports to Russia just fall off a cliff. Now look at the bar on the right. That's China. As the West bailed, China didn't just step in to fill the gap, it flooded the zone. And you gotta understand, this wasn't some happy accident. This was a strategy. Right, so Russia wasn't just sitting there taking punches and trying to survive the storm. No, it was making a very deliberate choice. It was turning its back on the old Western order and looking toward a completely new economic horizon. And that brings us to the next clue in this whole mystery, the Great Pivot East. This wasn't just Russia finding a few new customers. This was a calculated leap into an entirely different economic universe. And this is where the scale of that pivot becomes just mind-boggling. Let's take India as an example. Before the war, they bought almost no oil from Russia. We're talking about 1% of their total imports. 1. After the sanctions hit, that number exploded to nearly 40%. That is a 40-fold increase, almost overnight. Russia lost its biggest customer in Europe, sure, but it found an even bigger, even thirstier one in Asia. And this chart just makes it impossible to ignore. Look at the before picture. Russia is this tiny, insignificant sliver in India's energy supply. Now look at the after. It's the single biggest piece of the pie. In just a few months, the entire energy map of the world was fundamentally redrawn. But wait, how could they even do this with all the Western sanctions in the way? The answer is pretty wild. They built a shadow fleet of untraceable oil tankers and a parallel financial system to go with it. By selling its oil at a massive discount, Russia created a brand new economic network that operates completely outside of the West's control. And that new network, it's not just some temporary fix. It's the foundation of a new global bloc, a kind of shadow superpower that's been quietly growing in strength for years, right under our noses. It has a name. It's called the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, or the SCO. Now, you might not have heard of it, but you need to know it. It's a massive political, economic, and security alliance. And it was deliberately built to be a counterweight to Western-led groups like NATO and the G7. And just look at who's in the club. This is not some minor league team. You've got China, Russia, and India. We're talking 3 of the world's biggest countries, all nuclear powers. Then you add in major players like Iran and Pakistan. This is a heavyweight alliance, for sure. And here's where it gets really crucial. Let's compare them. The G7 represents about 10% of the world's population. The SCO, over 40%. But the economic numbers, that's what's truly staggering. By 2030, this SCO bloc is projected to account for nearly half of the entire global economy. This isn't just another rival. It's a potential successor to the whole Western-led system. And let's be crystal clear, there is a very direct geopolitical goal here. As one chief economist brutally put it, China sees Russia as its barking dog. The fight might be in Ukraine right now, but the real objective, she argues, is way bigger: to completely tear down and replace the global order that's been in place since the end of World War II.
So what's the result of all of this? Well, we've basically entered a completely new era, a new economic Cold War.
A former politician had the perfect phrase for this new reality. He said globalization isn't going away. Instead, it's morphing into something he calls weaponized interdependence. It's a world where the very economic ties that were supposed to bring us all closer together are now being used as weapons against each other.
And this chart just lays bare how divided the new world is. The countries that are sanctioning Russia, mostly the West, they only represent about 35% of the world's population. The other 65%, they're either staying neutral or actively siding with Russia. The Western coalition is now a global minority.
So the big takeaway here is unavoidable. The era of a single, interconnected global economy, it's over. The world has literally fractured into two competing economic blocks, and each one has its own supply chains, its own financial systems, and its own rules.
But look, this isn't just some abstract thing for academics and politicians to worry about. This new reality is already changing your daily life, whether you've realized it yet or not.
So what does this new economic Cold War actually mean for you? Well, it means our supply chains are way more fragile, which leads to shortages and delays for all sorts of stuff. It means inflation is probably here to stay because these two blocks are competing for the same resources, driving up the price of everything from your gas to your groceries. And it means that global instability isn't some faraway problem anymore. It's a permanent feature of our economy now.
You know, we started this with a simple mystery. Why didn't Russia's economy collapse? But the answer uncovered something so much bigger, a complete reshaping of the world as we know it. And it leaves us with one final and pretty urgent question. In a world that is now split in two, what happens next?